Please give a warm welcome to Tom Shillue.
The year was 1978. 1978 seems like not that long ago to me, but some of you probably weren't even born in 1978. Some of you were like, are you kidding? I was born in the 90s. That's not even that, you're not that young if you were born in 1990. Do you people understand that? Guys, Colin Hanks isn't even close to being young anymore. That's what's happening with the world. So sometimes I talk about the 70s and people are like, oh wow, that's weird. Yeah, I wasn't around in the 70s. Oh my God. And you're a regular person. They're not even a young person and they weren't around in the 70s. And I think, my God. The 70s was a great time though. Growing up in Boston. Boston, Massachusetts. And the winters were endless there. We had real winters back then. Like when you had a snow day, it was like two snow days. They couldn't clear the snow out of the streets for 2 days. So and we would listen to this was pre-internet. I love telling my daughters this. They're fascinated by all the old stories I have. You know, my daughter, like with my phone, she won't take a picture unless she can see the screen. You know, like I'll go like this to take a picture and she'll be like, turn it around. Like she wants to see it. She's like, she needs to see her face. And I was like, you know, the first iPhone, you couldn't even turn it around. She was like, are you kidding me? She couldn't believe how primitive the first iPhone was. And then I went on with her and I was like, forget about the first iPhone. We didn't used to have cameras on our phones. And she was like, it's like a terrible thought to her. And then I explained to her, I said, when I was a kid, we had to take pictures and there was no screen on it at all. And she was like, how do you know what the picture looked like? And I was like, you had to guess. And I was like, and then when you wanted to see the picture, you had to wait like 4 months. Because your mother made you use the whole roll. It was like 16 pictures, would take 14 at the beach, and she's like, no, we're waiting for our next vacation to take pictures. And she was like, and then you saw the pictures? I was like, no, then they came back in the mail, and you had to go pick them up at a weird place at the mall. So no one understands what it was like back then. You know, we had no internet, so you couldn't find, so the way you knew school was canceled, you tuned into the radio and you would listen. You would listen for all the towns in Massachusetts. And Norwood it took so long to get to Norwood. And even when they got to the ends, there were so many end towns in Norwood. There was like Norwell, Norwich, and you got to that damn town! And then they would say Norwood. Oh, and we had no school for the day. But in 1978, there was a little something called the Blizzard of '78. So that's why I prefaced all this with all this talk about the old days, because it used to just say the Blizzard of '78, and everyone knew what you were talking about. The Blizzard of '78, they knew about it. It was called the Blizzard of '78 way before '78 even. They knew it was coming. My whole childhood, they were like, the Blizzard of '78 will be here at this point. So you knew it was coming. And, you know, and then they finally said, they were like, the Blizzard of '78 is upon us. And I was like, oh my God, incredible timing. And it was because it was '78. And then the snows came down and we knew we weren't going to have school for days and days. And then it started with the snowballs. You know, we went out and we started a snowball fight. And it was me and it was Little Perkins. And, you know, we called each other Big and Little because everyone had older and younger brothers. So I was Little Shillue because I had an older brother. So it was me, Little Perkins, and Midigai. And Midigai and Perkins were my two kind of chums. And then his older brother, Chris Perkins, was kind of on the other side. It was like brother against brother. It was like the Civil War, you know? So Big Perkins and Morrissey were fighting us in snowballs. And it was 3 against 2, but we were a whole year younger than them. So we were still outgunned. and they were killing us with snowballs. And we were up in Shattuck Park, and we ran down from the park, and we were running through backyards, and they were pummeling us on the back of the head with their hard snowballs that they could pack very tight. And we took refuge in my basement. We ran into the cellar, and it was one of those little short cellar doors, but we could run in it because we were little kids. We opened up, we ran in, and we slammed the door, and there were snowballs off of the door. And we were laughing, ha 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 ha, and dripping all over the place. And my dad came out of the office in the basement. This was my dad. My dad dwelt in the basement. He had an office down there with a key punch machine in it. And he came out with the curtain. He opened up the curtain, and the cigar smoke came out. He came out, what the hell is going on? We were dripping on his precious concrete floor. And he said, what the hell is going on? He wanted us outside, and I'd forgotten. I wouldn't have just gone in the basement if I knew. But of course my dad had the day off from work too. Usually we had a school day and my dad went to work anyway, but this was the blizzard of 17. So he came walking through us, and we parted, and he walked right through us because he heard off the door. And he walked up and he grabbed the door. And I was like, slow-mo. And he opened the door, and my father was like, I was just seeing him from behind. I was there. We were just standing there dripping wet, looking at my dad. I was like, and I could see through his legs. And I could see, it was Morrissey and Big Perks, and they were like, And they went running, and my dad was like, he was screaming. My dad he was a really mean dad, All dads were mean back then. Dads were scarier in the 70s. Young people don't understand how scary dads were, because dads today are not scary. My dad could wake us up with his breathing. Saturday morning, he'd come in our bedroom, and then I'd hear his voice, he'd say, get in the car. Get in the car. It was like Darth Vader with a Boston accent. We'd run downstairs, we'd get in the back seat of the Dodge Dart, and we'd drive, and no seatbelts, right? Child safety, not important in the 70s. Dad took a right, you just slid over the left. Took a left, you slid back. It worked out. It worked. And so my dad, and they went running, and we were laughing. We held it in. We were like, and then we ran out and passed my dad, and he slammed the door, stay out all day. And but then we ran, and we were laughing. We couldn't believe the sight of Morrissey and Perkins through my dad's legs. And we eventually caught up to them, and because of that incident with my dad, there was a bit of a solidarity. And we went downtown to Norwood Center, and we started climbing up the fire escapes on the back of the buildings in Norwood and jumping off into the snowbanks, which had formed 15, 17, 19 feet high. And we're jumping off into these soft snowbanks. It was amazing, because it was enough snow, and then the plows pushed it up higher, and then the snow fell on top of that. So you had this kind of big pile, and it was very soft on top. So we're jumping off these really high buildings. Everyone except Twink. We called him Twink, John Perkins. Little Perkins. We called him Twink. First he was Twerp, then he was Twink. Our names changed all the time. I was Tom, and then I became Tomboy, then Zomboy, and then I was Zoid. So at this period he was Twink, and because he was tired of being called Twerp. So he was a skinny boy, and he was scared of things like this. So we usually kind of gave him an ouch, but we really wanted him to experience the snow. So we're jumping off into the soft snow and landing, going up to our necks, and we're encouraging Twink to jump off with us. And, encouraging, we're like, fairy, That's the way you encourage. In the 70s, you encourage kids by calling them fairies. It seems strange now. But we were we were like little Tony Robbins, we were like, you fairy, to motivate him to jump, to reach his goal, And it's so ironic that now you can't say fairy, but it's probably when you mean insult, You call a boy a fairy today, he'd be like, yeah, what, like Elsa, the queen of the Frozen North? That's great, she's tough. But back then we thought we would guilt him into jumping off into the snow. So we kept it up, fairy, And finally he got the wherewithal. He stood on the edge, and he closed his eyes, and he jumped. Now I'm in the snow right here, and he's coming down. And I could tell it was not going to go well because he just jumped and he was like this. He was floating like completely, you know, he wasn't tucking at all. You know, you have to tuck when you jump off of roofs because you kind of do cannonball and then you kind of go in like feet and butt together and, you know, and you're all tucked in. But when you're too gangly, you know, you can really get hurt. So he's coming down gangly style. He's open at gangly style. And I'm like, you know. And he comes down and his feet hit and immediately he starts to crunch up like that. So his feet hit first and they rush up and hit his chest. Now when your knees hit your chest, the air rushes out of you. All air just rushes out of you like a windbag, you know. And Twink was, did I mention he was asthmatic? He was kind of, he had lots of nasal issues. He had a lot of extra, he was a milk drinker too. He never drank water, always milk. So he had that really thick snot, you know. You know, it was yellow and it had girth to it. It had a thickness to it. And it was always there, like one side always had like a little dangler, you know, down there. The yellow ball, it looked like a little lottery ball, you know. And then he would sniff and it would disappear and then it would return. And so he's coming down and his knees hit his chest and the air rushes out of his nasal passages and he hits the snow and his head jerks like that. And with the rush of air, because his mouth and his eyes were closed tight, it just shut out. And these two strands of thick, putty-like snot came shooting out of his nose into the snow, and they shot out and snaked into the snow. Like there was such a length to it, it was like a rope, and don't shoot the messenger, I'm just telling you what I saw. And then, this is what happens when you get the wind knocked out of you. Involuntarily, you suck back in, you know? So it was like, oh my God. These two long strands of snow, which was now covered in frost, shot up his nose. And that's when he opened his eyes. He was like, and he didn't know what had happened. He just knew he landed and he didn't get hurt at first. But then these two snakes, these two frozen ropes had snaked its way through his head. Do you know how many miles of nasal passages you have? I think it's like 40 miles or something. He had snow going through his entire nasal cavity on both sides. Yeah. So the blizzard of '78, it is not just legendary for that blizzard, that storm that started the career of Michael Dukakis. The blizzard of '78 was the site of the greatest brain freeze in history. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.